It's so bright outside, I can't even see if this is like in focus or anything. But bright and hot out. I think like I was talking to a friend of mine today, and she lives in the UK, and she was talking about how hot it fucking is there, and because they're getting pounded right now, and it's predicted to be really really bad. Uh, it's a neat little light reflection or fractal or whatever in the sun, whatever. I don't even know if it's gonna show up. I'll just seem like I'm delirious, whatever. Brain tangents over, and let's try to get back on topic. So I was talking to my friend, and uh, I know like they're not used to really hot weather, but I never knew like I knew some of the details of why this is really bad for them. Uh, but I wanted to ask her because me reading about it's totally different than me asking somebody who's actually living the situation. So I asked her, I was like, what is the thing with like air units as far as like central air, like window air conditioning units, fans, even like what percentage of people in the UK actually have this or have access to it? And she told me the percentage is really low, and the exact number really doesn't matter. It's just really low. But she was also talking about things that I sort of knew about just from watching old TV shows about power cuts and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why, like down here in Florida where I live, when we have a power outage after a hurricane, you'll have like, some people have like 30 fans going until their AC gets back up and stuff like that. They can't do that stuff there. It's a totally different situation. Like if they had all that stuff, then they would have a power outage, which could make situations even worse in some areas and stuff. But I think one of the biggest points that she brought up, and I'm hearing similar news stories, she was talking about how they had to repaint stuff on railroads to keep it stuff that was dark, to keep it melting basically. And then that brought us to both talking about the subject of like, it's not even a matter of people being able to live through the heat. Heat is really bad. It's for people who are out in it all the time. It's like even down here in Florida, like the cold, a lot of people's like, oh, the cold never hurt anybody down here. Yeah, people have died from it down here. If you're living on the ground, if that's where you sleep at night and you're outside, even those temperatures that we ourselves living here might not think it's that cold. They are. And there's some people that might not think the heat in some places is hot, but if you're not used to it, then it's, it can be deadly. Also, the fact that the whole system set up, and that whole infrastructure system set up, is not geared for that. That's the problem we're seeing in Texas right now in the United States, with them not being geared up for the cold weather down there. But that's one of the issues. Like, yes, even putting aside and being cruel and putting aside the really vulnerable fucking people to something like a really change in normal weather in an area, most people could probably deal with it, but the infrastructure it's built for that area is not going to be able to deal with it. That's the thing people don't get. Like, people think like, oh, climate change happens like if it gets colder in Florida or it gets hotter here, you don't just change. One, crops don't just change that way. The soil is been that way for a long, long time. The weather patterns have been that way for a long, long time in areas. And even infrastructure when it comes to stuff like she was talking about, like stuff melting. I've heard of tarmacs melting in some areas where they weren't used to it. And it's even like when things get cold down here and you have a lot of crops and stuff, like, yeah, that'll die. It's the infrastructure that'll fall, it's the electrical systems that'll fall, it's the roads that weren't built. We don't understand that every bit of our lives when it comes to infrastructure in places is built around climate in a lot of ways. The way the roads are made, the way sewer systems are made, the way everything is made is built on the climate system in that area. If that just shifts, even gradually, which it is doing right now around the world, it's going to be catastrophic. And it's not going to be a matter of somebody just having a heat stroke outside or even in their house. It's going to be a matter of stuff collapsing. Sinkhole, New York City, or is it in New Jersey? I don't know. Like, you're going to have more of that type stuff. The collapsing of buildings and all this other stuff, infrastructure stuff, because we're not used to it. When you start having hurricanes in places where they're not used to it, it's going to be a very bad thing. When you start having snowstorms in places where they're not used to it, it's going to be a very bad thing. When you have heat in places where people aren't used to it, it's going to be a very, very bad thing. They've been telling us since before I was born. I remember hearing it so much when I was a kid. And nobody did fuck shit about it. And it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter in places, and it's getting colder in other places. And the storms are getting bigger. Like even down here in Florida, they're talking about categorizing hurricanes. Cause I don't fucking know. I was just talking to my friend who I have that personal connection to, because I wish it was somebody I could say, you know, won't you just come to my house and we stay here for a while until it cools down a little bit. I can't, because she lives in another country a long way away. And I was seeking out knowledge because knowledge calms my nerves about stuff a little bit more. I'm just worried about friends of mine in those areas, in those situations. And it's scary for me. So I know it's terrifying for them. And it should be terrifying for all of us. But the people in charge don't give a fuck. Because I don't know. Either they think they're going to be taken away on the chariots to heaven, or they somehow think that their money is going to float them to safety. I don't fucking know. You're going to die like the rest. And the craziness of Florida is I just drove through a freaking thunderstorm to get home, and the rain stopped finally because I'm sitting in a car. Don't worry, this will be dry. Well, it's getting a little bit later. If this was in the middle of the day, this would be dry quick. But I guess when I was talking about, like, my whole thing talking about climate change and like how it's going to affect people that people don't really think about in the most destructive ways. When it comes down to it, it's nobody's going to survive it. Like, I don't care what anybody thinks. You know, we can't go to space and go to another planet. Like, we're not capable of that, by the way. No. And you're never going to get enough people to work together. You're never going to get anything to get something like that. The only way to limit the damage would be to take action. Governments take action. And probably primarily United States government. Another reason why the United States is the biggest threat to world safety. Yeah. I just worry. And I guess right now, I'm just like, I got several friends in the UK, and I'm like, because I'm hearing this news right now, it's kind of worrying me, like, for them right now, but this is like a all of us thing, because like I said, like, we're getting bigger storms and more hurricanes down here, you know, California's getting flooding and more fires in places, and like, it's nowhere is it going good. But, you know, I was, like I said, to start this whole thing off, I was talking to somebody, and the notion got to me that I was in my head, I was like, I wish I could just have this person, like, invite her and her husband over and be like, like, but you can't do that. We can't shelter the whole world in our backyards. We can't do what we want to. Because us as individuals, when it comes down to it, when it comes to climate change, probably beyond any other really big issue, unless corporations and governments get on board with it, there's not a goddamn thing we can do about it. And that's terrifying. When you think about so many other issues where we're like, we can join together as a community, we can make a difference. But if the rich and powerful don't make a step to do this, which who thinks they really will? Yep. I'm gonna go in and drink.